Last session, we started with reinforcement learning. We learned about how to play Atari, and in particular, we learned about deep Q learning with experience replay. Basically, you have a replay buffer. And we learned that such an algorithm, if you apply it to the games of Atari, on many of them, you're going to be able to achieve superhuman performance. But then for such cases, our state of actions were discrete. So you had K choices to make while playing Atari. When you want to make things more realistic and go towards robotics later on, things are going to become continuous, your decisions. So your control is going to become continuous. And let's see an example of the type of problems that we want to solve. So I'm going to make this a little bit faster. So this is a reaching task. This is a gripper. You have a random target, and then you want to take the pocket and put it in the correct location. And these are low dimensional features. By low dimensional, I mean you're parameterizing your model with the torques at the joints. So you're featureizing your model. This is a moving gripper task. Again, low dimensional features. This is a walker task. And this environment is a physics simulator. And you're going to have multiple different types of physics simulators. For instance, you can use the physics simulators given to you by Unity or by NVIDIA or by OpenAI. These are usually called OpenAI Gym, for instance, or TensorFlow Gym, or even Mojuku. And these are high dimensional. These are supposed to mimic the way that a human would operate. It's going to see an image and work on the pixel level. So now this is the DDPG algorithm and the type of policies that the algorithm has learned. Now I can go back to the slides and talk about the algorithm behind it. So these are high dimensional and continuous. For instance, a human arm can have 7 degrees of freedom. If you want to quantize it, make it discrete, and let's say you have 3 choices only, that's going to give you 3 to the power 7 for your dimensionality of the action space, and it's huge. Is there a way to work with continuous variables to begin with? A little bit of the background. This we covered last session. You have an environment. That environment could be a stochastic. You have some time, some observations at that particular time. You're going to take some actions, and your actions now are not discrete. They are continuous, and they are in Rn. So they are n-dimensional. In this case, it is 7 degrees of freedom, so n is going to be 7, rather than it being 2,187. You have some reward. You interact with your environment, and the environment is going to give you some reward. You have some state, which could be a concatenation of the observations and actions that you took up until that point in time. And if the final observation is not enough for you to know the entire state of your system, it means that you need to concatenate your previous decisions and observations. That's going to be called a partially observed environment. On the other hand, if xt is enough to give you enough information about the current state of the system, that's going to be called fully observed environment. And then we said that we usually have a policy that takes you from the space of states, from the state of your system, to the probabilities. And then you can think of this policy as a conditional distribution, conditioned on the fact that you know what state you're currently at, conditioned on the fact that you know ST, you have a distribution over the type of actions that you can take. So last session, I promised that I'm going to give you a more detailed definition of Markov decision process and MDP. So this is the definition. You have some initial state distribution. You have some transition dynamics that not only depend on the previous state, but it depends on the action that you took. This is Markov because the only input that you're conditioning on is the previous time step. So you're not conditioning on st-1, st-2, etc. So you're conditioning on the immediate past. That's why it's a Markov process. And then it's a Markov decision process because your decisions are going to change the state that you're going to see into the future. And then you have some reward to help you make better informed decisions of what actions to take. And then we defined this also last session, the future discounted return. So you're just accumulating your returns into the future. And let's say you're currently at time t and you're looking into the future, but then a return today is more valuable than a return tomorrow, than the same return tomorrow. And actually, this gamma somehow models the fact that there is a probability that the agent is not going to survive until tomorrow. So you're discounting it. And you have the same concept in economy. It says that money today is more valuable than money tomorrow. So you're discounting it than the same money tomorrow. Okay, that's the definition of future discounted return. So far we have done nothing special. It's just we are writing the definition and introducing the notation. But what objective function do we want to maximize? Because this is a reward, you're maximizing it. You want to maximize your reward. This is the expected reward because everything here is a stochastic. Your decisions, your policy is a stochastic. It's actually a random variable. Your environment is a random variable. It's a stochastic process. So you're taking expectations with respect to your environment, and your rewards are also not deterministic. So your reward and states are going to come from your environment and the actions that you take. This is your objective function, and you want to maximize this with respect to pi. And we saw this concept last session also. This is an abstract concept. So you're never going to see it when you're implementing your algorithm behind a computer, but mathematically you're going to see it. So each state has some visitation probability according to the policy that you're taking and depending on your environment. So we are associating a distribution to that. And this is a discounted distribution, and you're discounting it by this discount factor. Again, the same fact that you have to discount the future. Previously, we defined the optimal action value function. So we were defining pi star, actually q star, where you were maximizing this with respect to your pi. But now let's keep pi in the same location. Let's just keep it and define an action value for that particular pi. So this says this is basically the expected return after taking action AT in a state ST and thereafter following policy pi. So your actions are going to be in the future. You just took an action at time t. You're taking an expectation over the actions that you're going to take according to your policy into the future. So I is bigger than t. Your state of the environment, you just saw the state today, but then for the future, you're sampling from your environment. But today's return is also a random variable. So this is bigger than or equal to t. Okay, this is our action value function. And then we can write down a Bellman equation for it. This Bellman equation is different from what we saw last session. So last session, you had Q star here, and then you were doing a maximization here over the actions. Now you're replacing that maximization with an expectation that you're taking the expectation with respect to your policy. And this is not necessarily the optimal policy. And but the rest of it is very similar to before. This should be a function of ST and AT. The term on the right is a function of RT, AT, AT plus 1, and ST plus 1. So we have to get rid of ST plus 1 and AT plus 1 and RT. So you do an expectation with respect to your environment. And then to get rid of AT, you do another expectation with respect to your policy. But working with the stochastic policies is a little bit hard because then as you take the expectation, and if you want to maximize your policy, there is no way to sample from this policy and then maximize it because you're taking an expectation with respect to the policy. Okay, because in the end of the day, you want to do Monte Carlo estimates of these. It's okay, you're going to be able to do it and then use that trick that we used when we were doing the hard attention paper. It is doable, but then that's going to be an approximation using the fact that the derivative of a function is the function itself times the derivative of its log. So I'm sure you remember that, but we are not going to use that here. We are going to make a simplifying assumption here. We are going to make an assumption that our policy is deterministic. Okay, if it is deterministic, we can just get rid of its expectation right away. And then we are going to add randomness on the fly to it. Okay, if pi is deterministic, you can get rid of that expectation, and then you can set AT plus 1 to be coming from your policy, which is now deterministic. And remember, what we are doing here is we want to get back, we want to write down a loss function in the end. So all of this trouble is to give us a good loss function. So we made a simplifying assumption here that this is deterministic. And if it is deterministic, you can get rid of that expectation. Now you can do Q-learning, like what we were doing in the previous 2 slides. Okay, because this is now going to give you a loss function that you can optimize. Okay, we can do Q-learning on that. And by the way, on the fly, yes, we assume that our policy is deterministic. There is a deterministic policy function. But then on the fly, you can add noise or encourage noisy behavior, encourage exploration. But the cool thing is that there are no derivatives going through this stochastic behavior. That one I'm going to go into more details. This is just for notation. Just keep that in mind that beta is a stochastic behavior. But as soon as you know your Q, like what we were doing last session, you're going to know your policy by some maximization. Given S, do a maximum over all of the actions, and the best one is going to give you your mu. But there is a catch. Previously, solving this maximization problem was very easy. Why? Because you had finitely many choices on your actions. And you can choose the best one right away. Compare all of them, choose the best one. But now, solving this maximization problem is not easy. Why? Because you don't want to wait for an optimizer, perhaps based on gradient descent, to converge, so that it just gives you the correct action for one state. So that's just too costly. Okay, but for now, let's say you have a mu function. Let's go in the theory route that you are somehow magically able to solve this maximization problem. Just for the sake of making some progress, if you assume you know mu, you're going to be able to write down your loss function. It is very similar to Q-learning that we did last session. The thing that you're maximizing over are the parameters of your Q function. You're at a state ST, you're taking action AT, and then you're comparing it to YT, and YT is going to come from your Bellman equation. Okay, so YT is the return plus a discounted Q. But let's go a little bit into more details in this notation. You see ST here, you see ST plus 1 up there, ST plus 1 down here, and then your actions are the ones that are based on a mu. So writing down this loss function requires you to know your mu, to know your policy. So as soon as you know your mu, you're going to be able to write down this loss function. But that's a big if. Finding mu is not easy. You don't want to solve that maximization problem. But in the end of the day, what you have is a function. As soon as you know S, mu S is just a function. And whenever you see a function and you learned about deep learning already, you're going to approximate that function with a neural network. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to put a neural network on mu. We have yet another neural network for Q, and they are going to help each other out. It's very similar to what you were doing with generative adversarial neural network. So you had 2 functions helping each other out. One of them was helping to write a loss function for the other guy. So it's the same thing. Mu is going to help us write a loss function for Q. And as soon as you have a loss function for Q, you can do replay buffer. You can separate the target network with some parameters theta Q or theta Q prime. And then you can optimize this. This depends on you knowing mu. But how are you going to learn the parameters of a neural network that you're putting on your policy? So now you're putting 2 neural networks, one on your policy, one on Q. And the neural network that you're putting on mu is going to have its own parameters, and it's going to be an actor function. Okay, this is an actor-critic framework now. So this is actor, the other guy is the critic, Q. Okay, so far so good. The critic, we know how to learn it. As soon as you know mu, as soon as you know theta mu, the parameters of your actor, you're going to plug that inside this loss, and you're going to have a loss function that you can optimize. And that loss function is based on the Bellman equation, like the math that we went through up there, under some assumptions that this is deterministic. The question is how we're going to learn mu. So far, mu was helping us learn Q. In a similar way, Q is going to help us learn mu. So the critic is going to help us learn the actor. But where is the loss function going to come from? So the loss function for mu Mu is basically your deterministic policy, and there should be something that you want to maximize. And if we go back here in the math that we started with, we want to maximize this J. But you're gonna approximate that J with your Q function, okay? Because the Q function, if you look at its formula, it's in direct relationship with your return, with your future discounted return. Okay, let's see. So we want to take the derivative of this, J, with respect to the parameters of our actor. We are gonna use Q to approximate RT. So Q is approximating RT, and then you are in a state ST. So your S is gonna be equal to ST, and your actions are gonna be based on your actor. So the actions that you're gonna take are gonna depend on your mu. And then taking the derivative of this guy is not that hard. Why? Because Q is differentiable. So you can pass the gradients through Q. So you're taking the derivative of Q with respect to parameters of your mu. You can just take A from this formula, plug it inside here, and use the chain rule. So it's gonna be the derivative of Q with respect to A, evaluated at our actor at that state, times the derivative of our actor. So this is just the chain rule. So as soon as you know the gradients, you're gonna be able to optimize your actor. And what is the objective function here? Maybe looking at the gradients is hard. And in modern deep learning frameworks like TensorFlow or PyTorch, you usually don't write down your gradients. You just write down a loss function, and then TensorFlow is gonna take care of the backpropagation and chain rule. So you don't have to do that chain rule on yourself. What are we doing? Forget about this negative sign. And let's say this is not a loss function. You are maximizing this. So you're maximizing J. And let's say this is J at time t. And you're going to approximate that J at time t by your Q function. You're in a state ST because you're at time t. You saw the state. And then your actions are based on your actor. And now this is your loss function. As soon as you multiply it by a negative sign, that's going to give you a loss function. So you have two loss functions here now, one for Q and one for mu. To write down the loss function for Q, you need to know your mu. To write down the loss function for mu, you need to know your Q. So Q and mu are helping each other out, optimize, like what you were doing with GANs, the discriminator and the generator. For this guy, theta Q is known. So you stop the gradients on theta Q, and here theta mu are known. But in the end of the day, after all of this trouble, this is nothing but a famous classical algorithm in reinforcement learning. That is deterministic policy gradient algorithm. And it is deterministic because you're assuming your policy to be deterministic to get rid of this expectation. But this algorithm is going to be called deep deterministic policy algorithm. So if you hear about that, this is DDPG. How does it work? You initialize your critic network, Q. You initialize your actor network with some initial weights. So initially, everything is random. So your Q and mu are very stupid initially. You're going to initialize some target, Q prime and mu prime. And the target, you need it because you want to write down the target for your loss functions. And you want to make your data look as IID as possible. So you're separating, you're making copies of theta Q and theta mu. You initialize a replay buffer. So you're going to collect data in that buffer, like we did last session. We are going to do M simulations in our simulated environment, the ones that I just showed you. Okay, there are going to be M rounds of episodes. There are going to be M episodes. You're going to have a random process. So you're going to take some random actions at each time. You're going to make some random actions. And this is where beta is coming in. So you're going to have some stochastic behavior to help you explore your space. So sometimes you make some random actions. And then initially, you're going to observe your initial state of the system, S1. And then you're going to do an iteration. You're going to interact with your environment for T time steps, a maximum of T time steps. Maybe in the process, if you have a walker, that walker is going to fall down and your algorithm is going to stop before reaching the maximum T, or you're going to force it to stop at capital T. You're going to select an action. You select the action based on your policy plus some random behavior. And mu, because we are modeling it with a neural network, we can evaluate it. Given the state, it's going to give us an action. We are going to execute the action in the environment, get some reward, go to the next state, and this is going to be the data that we are storing. The current state, the action that we took, the reward that we collected, and the next state. And we're going to put that in our buffer. Now it's time to do gradient descent and do optimization. We are going to sample a random mini batch from our data set. These are state, action, reward, next state tuples. We need a target for the loss function here. We are going to need yt, and we are going to reconstruct it here. It's going to be ri plus gamma q prime. This is where the target network is going to come in. Si plus 1, assuming that you know mu, you can write down your y. And as soon as you write down your y, this is just mean squared error. And this is this loss function here, coming from your Bellman equation. That's going to give you some gradients with respect to theta q that you can optimize. Now it's the actor's turn to be optimized. What are we going to do? We are going to look at this objective here, these gradients here, and we are just going to evaluate them on the batch that we just sampled from our data set. So it's going to be 1 over n, summation over I. This is for the expected value. Now you see why I don't emphasize rho beta that much or rho pi that much, because you never see them when you implement your algorithm. You're going to implement them using sampling, using Monte Carlo. And you're sampling from your data set. And they're going to turn into summations. You take the gradient of q because of this term here, and then the gradient of mu. And that's going to give you the gradient of your loss with respect to the parameters of your actor. And you're going to use that to optimize your actor. But in the end, previously, our target network, we were updating it every couple of steps. Here, you're going to keep updating them on the fly. And these are the average networks. So you're doing a moving average of the parameters of q and the parameters of mu. And these are going to give you your targets. I think this is a good time to ask questions. Any questions?
I have just one quick question.
Sure.
So when we update the actor and the critic, those become our theta q and theta mu. And then we update theta q prime and theta mu prime here. And we just keep following that? Okay.
Exactly. So you're going to use this gradient here and the gradient of this loss function to update, to take a tiny step and update theta q and theta mu. And then you're going to use those two to update theta q prime and theta mu prime. And these are just moving averages. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
The main reason we need this mu-s in this case is because the search space over actions is too high. So we need to approximate it with the neural network.
Exactly. So because this optimization is very expensive. So in simple terms, you're making a surrogate for this optimization problem.
Yeah.
So that it's cheaper to evaluate.
Whereas before we just kind of evaluate like left, right, up, down, and that's very small and we just do it deterministically.
Yes, so you had a finite set of choices. You just evaluate your network once. And then if you remember, we were turning the actions to the output. So you're going to read your output and then select the maximum one.
Yeah.
If your action space is discrete. But here your action space is continuous.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Any other questions? So yeah, here so far, I know that you are used to doing data exploration like speech, text, images. Your data exploration task here, or your homework, is to explore the simulator environment, is to explore the environment. The environment is the thing that's giving you the data. And there are multiple choices. Just Google for OpenAI Gym or TensorFlow Gym. You're going to find some very good simulators. Or Mojuku, just play around with those.